people never discover. The biggest decisions affecting your life are often made in rooms you will never enter. Not because you are incapable. Not because you are unworthy. But because nobody told you the game was already being played behind closed doors. Most people move through life believing that outcomes are determined by effort alone. They are taught that if they work hard enough, stay patient enough, and prove themselves long enough, the world will eventually reward them. They imagine opportunity as a fair contest. A race where everyone begins at the same starting line. But reality is far darker than that. Long before opportunities appear in public, conversations are happening in private. Long before a position becomes available, someone has already suggested a name. Long before an investment is approved, trust has already been established. Long before a leader is chosen, alliances have already been formed. The public announcement is often nothing more than the final chapter of a story that was written months earlier. And most people never see the writing. Imagine a table. Not a literal table, but a symbol. A place where influence gathers. A place where decisions are shaped. A place where futures are discussed. At this table sit people with information, access, resources, and connections. Some are wealthy. Some are powerful. Some hold no official authority at all. Yet their opinions carry enormous weight. Names are mentioned. Reputations are evaluated. Opportunities are distributed. Doors are opened. Doors are closed. Entire destinies can shift because of a single conversation between people most will never meet. The frightening part is that these decisions are rarely presented as conspiracies. They don't need to be. Human beings naturally create circles of trust. We prefer familiar faces over strangers. We choose comfort over uncertainty. We recommend people we know before considering people we don't. And from these simple psychological tendencies, invisible systems of power emerge. Systems that quietly shape careers. Systems that influence wealth. Systems that determine who rises and who remains unseen. The average person believes success is a ladder. But those at the table understand it is often a network. A web of relationships. A flow of information. An exchange of influence. The ladder exists, but many of its rungs are hidden. And those hidden rungs are rarely discussed in public. That is why two people can possess equal talent and experience completely different futures. One is spoken about in rooms they have never entered. The other remains invisible. One receives opportunities they never applied for. The other spends years knocking on doors that never open. The difference is not always intelligence. The difference is not always skill. Sometimes the difference is simply whose name is being spoken when they are absent. Most people underestimate the power of conversations happening beyond their awareness. They assume that if they cannot see something, it must not exist. But power has always preferred the shadows. Influence is most effective when it remains unseen. The greatest decisions are rarely made under bright lights. They are made quietly. Casually. Over dinners. Private calls. Small gatherings. Moments that appear insignificant to outsiders. Yet those moments can redirect entire lives. And while millions focus on the visible stage, a much smaller group is paying attention to the room behind the curtain. Because they understand a terrifying reality. By the time most people notice a decision, it has already been made. The vote is often a formality. The announcement is often a performance. The outcome was shaped long before anyone was invited to witness it. This realization can feel unsettling. It can make the world seem unfair. But it also reveals something important. If conversations shape opportunities, if relationships shape decisions, if influence shapes outcomes, then understanding these hidden dynamics becomes one of the most valuable forms of knowledge a person can possess. Because once you recognize that the table exists, you begin to ask a different question. Not whether decisions are being made, but how those decisions are actually made. And that leads us to an even darker truth. A truth that explains why talent alone is often not enough. Because when choices are made behind closed doors, people rarely choose the best option. They choose the option they already know. The unsettling idea that major decisions affecting your life may be made without your knowledge. There is a thought so uncomfortable that most people instinctively reject it. A thought that quietly challenges everything they believe about control, fairness, and free will. What if some of the most important decisions affecting your life were never actually made by you? What if they were made by people you have never met? People whose names you do not know. People sitting around tables you were never invited to. Most individuals move through life believing they are the primary architects of their future. They believe every success and every failure originates from their own choices. And while personal responsibility matters, there is another force operating beneath the surface. A force hidden within conversations, recommendations, introductions, opinions, perceptions. Invisible judgments made when you are not present to defend yourself. The frightening reality is that your life is constantly being influenced by decisions happening beyond your awareness. Somebody decides which resume deserves attention. Somebody decides whose proposal sounds trustworthy. Somebody decides who gets introduced to the right person. Somebody decides who belongs inside the circle and who remains outside looking in. And these decisions often happen in minutes, sometimes seconds. Yet their consequences can echo for years. A single recommendation can launch a career. A single negative impression can quietly destroy an opportunity before it ever reaches your hands. What makes this reality so disturbing is not that these people are evil. Most are not. The true danger is that they are human. And human beings are driven by biases they rarely recognize. They favor familiarity. They trust people who resemble themselves. They protect existing relationships. They seek comfort over uncertainty. They choose what feels safe rather than what is objectively best. In their minds, they are simply making reasonable decisions. But from the outside, those decisions can completely alter another person's destiny. Imagine two individuals with identical talent, identical intelligence, identical work ethic. One person's name is mentioned during an important conversation. The other person's name never enters the room. The first receives an opportunity. The second remains invisible. The difference between them may have nothing to do with merit. The difference may simply be that one was remembered while the other was forgotten. This is how destiny is often shaped. Not through dramatic events. Not through grand conspiracies. But through thousands of small decisions made by ordinary people pursuing their own interests. A manager recommending a colleague. A friend introducing a business partner. An investor backing a familiar face. A committee trusting someone they already know. Each decision appears insignificant on its own. Yet together, they create pathways. Pathways that determine who rises, who struggles, who gains access, and who never even learns the door existed. Most people spend their lives focusing exclusively on what happens in front of them. The interview, the meeting, the application, the presentation. But the truly influential moments often occur long before these events begin. In rooms where no official record is kept. In conversations that leave no evidence. In judgments formed without your knowledge. And perhaps the darkest realization of all is this: you may believe you are competing against circumstances, when in reality, you are often competing against perceptions that were formed before you ever arrived. Perceptions built from rumors, introductions, reputations, assumptions, stories. Because before people decide what to do with you, they first decide who they believe you are. And that invisible version of you, the one that exists in other people's minds, can become more powerful than the real person standing before them. Which raises a dangerous question. If major decisions are influenced by perception, if opportunities are granted based on stories, if people are judging you before you enter the room, then what exactly enters the room before you do? The answer is your reputation. And that reputation may already be shaping your future while you remain completely unaware. The table, the place where power gathers. Most people hear the phrase, the table, and imagine a piece of furniture. A boardroom. A conference room. A dinner table surrounded by executives and politicians. But the table is something far more dangerous than that. The table is a symbol. A symbol of where influence converges. A symbol of where decisions are shaped before they are revealed to the world. A symbol of the hidden center of gravity that pulls events, opportunities, and destinies into its orbit. Every society has its tables. Every organization has its tables. Every industry, every institution, every circle of influence has a place where power gathers. And the unsettling truth is that these tables are often invisible. They do not always exist in government buildings. They do not always exist in corporate offices. Sometimes they exist in private messages, exclusive gatherings, social circles, friendships built over decades, networks of trust formed long before opportunities ever appeared. The average person sees outcomes. The people at the table see the process. The average person sees the promotion. The people at the table remember the conversations that led to it. The average person sees the successful entrepreneur. The people at the table remember who vouched for them when nobody else would. The average person sees a leader rise. The people at the table remember the alliances that quietly carried them there. This is the hidden architecture of power. Most outcomes appear sudden because the public only witnesses the final act. They never see the negotiations, the recommendations, the subtle exchanges of influence, the invisible agreements. They never see the table. What makes the table so powerful is not wealth alone. Money matters. Authority matters. Status matters. But the greatest currency at the table is often something far less visible. Access. The ability to reach people others cannot. The ability to influence conversations before they become decisions. The ability to shape perceptions before judgments are made. This is why some individuals possess enormous influence despite holding no official title. They are trusted, connected, respected within the network. When they speak, people listen. When they recommend someone, doors open. When they express doubt, opportunities disappear. Not because they command power, but because they occupy a position near the center of the table. And proximity to power often matters more than power itself. History is filled with figures who ruled from the shadows. Advisors who shaped kings. Strategists who guided presidents. Confidants whose opinions carried more weight than public officials. The public saw the throne, but influence often sat beside it. But because they occupy a position near the center of the table, and proximity to power often matters more than power itself. History is filled with figures who ruled from the shadows. Advisors who shaped kings. Strategists who guided presidents. Confidants whose opinions carried more weight than public officials. The public saw the throne, but influence often sat beside it. Quietly. Patiently. Unseen. That is the nature of the table. It rewards those who understand human behavior. Those who understand trust. Those who understand perception. Those who understand that people rarely make decisions in isolation. Every decision is influenced by relationships. Every relationship influences access. And access determines who gets heard when critical choices are being made. This is why power concentrates. People naturally seek certainty. They rely on familiar voices, trusted recommendations, established networks. And over time, those networks become self-reinforcing. The same people talk to each other, recommend each other, support each other, protect each other. Not necessarily out of malice, but because human psychology is wired to trust what is known and fear what is unknown. The result is a table that grows stronger with every conversation. A table that quietly decides who belongs, who advances, who gains influence, and who remains invisible. Most people spend years trying to improve their skills. And skill is important. But skill alone does not guarantee access. Because before your abilities are evaluated, something else is often evaluated first. Do people know your name? Do they trust your reputation? Do they feel comfortable betting on you? These questions are rarely asked openly. Yet they are constantly being answered behind closed doors. The table is not merely a place where decisions are made. It is a place where perceptions become reality. A place where narratives are accepted. A place where futures begin taking shape long before the world notices. And that is why understanding the table changes everything. Because once you realize where power gathers, you begin to see a darker truth. People do not always choose the most capable person. They do not always choose the smartest person. It is a place where perceptions become reality. A place where narratives are accepted. A place where futures begin taking shape long before the world notices. And that is why understanding the table changes everything. Because once you realize where power gathers, you begin to see a darker truth. People do not always choose the most capable person. They do not always choose the smartest person. They do not always choose the most deserving person. More often than they would like to admit. They choose the person who feels familiar. The person they already know. The person they already trust. And that simple psychological tendency may be one of the most powerful forces shaping human destiny.